Welcome to LaGrange First Church of God. You are now listening to our weekly podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Good morning. It's funny, Ben, when Ben and I talked and Ben asked if I would do the message, it's like, okay, great. And then last night about 11 o'clock, this is what my voice started sounding like. So I'm not going to be probably as loud as I normally would, which is probably good for you all. So first off, anybody here play chess? Anybody? Chess? Okay. I used to love chess. It's funny, my mom dug this out, and she goes, I didn't even know you guys played chess. I did used to love chess. The problem is now most of my games consist of Uno, but not correct Uno. We just put the colors in the right piles. I have 3 children, see, 2, 4, and 8. So that trouble, sorry, those are the main games. But I really enjoyed chess when I was younger. And the thing is, the reason that I enjoyed chess is it was strategic. Now, does anybody know what is the most important piece? What are the most important pieces? Yes. So the king. Anybody else have? No. What's more? Anybody else have important pieces? The queen. Anybody else? Pawn. The funny thing is, okay. Maybe this isn't going to work. Okay. The reason I picked chess is that the interesting thing, chess was developed about 1,500 years ago, give or take. That's kind of the estimate. And it was developed in northern India, China, that Asian region there. And there's really a few theories. One main theory is it was actually developed by a very wise man, no name, I don't know who it is, wise man. No myrrh or frankincense, just wise man. And it was developed specifically to teach a king something, which is really weird, right? Because the first thing we think of when you think of chess, there's specific pieces that are important. The king's obviously the most important. Or the queen, because she is obviously always in charge. Or moves the most, that's what I meant to say. She has the most free reign on the board. Gosh, that makes so much more sense now. But the interesting thing is the whole point of this was not that there's not any piece that's more important than others. So when you start looking at this, every single piece, and the point of the wise men was every single piece on the board is important. And I know it's weird to think about because most of us, when we start playing, unless you're, they make a movie about you because you're a chess master and you can hit I don't even know how they do that. But, we normally start with the pawns, right? Let's just get the pawns out of the way. We can start moving the actual things around. And everybody has their normal go-to. I'm going to move this, and I'll move this, and then I'm going to win. But every piece on here is important. For those who didn't know, obviously every piece has a specific move, a specific job. If you've never played chess, it's been a long time for me. So if I get one of these, if there's very specific moves that I miss and you have studied for years, please allow me some leeway. The pawns move forward. That's it, basically. They just march forward right into whatever they need to. Sometimes you do have to sacrifice them. They move ahead and you sacrifice them. The rooks on the sides, they go sideways, like in straight lines, which I think in some ways probably represent a castle, right? Or like a fortification. It creates boundaries, okay? You have the knight, which does very strategic and planned movements. It only can do those movements. Very similar to soldiers, right? They know their movements. They move in those movements. You have the bishop that is on a very, very straight and narrow path. Very religious. Okay, that was a structure that was created. You have the queen who, yes, goes out and does what the king needs to be done. Okay, and then you have the king. Now the king we think is the most important, but the funny thing is he does it's the worst move. You can't hardly use the king very often, right? Unless you're very strategic about it, and I'm not that strategic. So normally the king just stays there. And how many of you have done this when you're getting close to losing and you're like, I'm here. Now I'm here. Now I'm here. And then they get you and you're like, I'm done. And he's gone. The board's gone. I don't remember where everything was. But every piece is important. Now, The other theory is that chess was developed in China by a general. Basically, it was more so used as a battle plan, like a planning situation. It was used to develop a strategy for a very specific battle, and then from then it was adapted. And the thing is, this was developed 1,500, so many years ago. It had lots of weird names. I can't say half of them because most of them are in Asian languages that I don't speak. But they developed, and then it got into the basic classical era in Europe, and then in the 1800s it got huge. In the 1880s, they developed this first, big tournament where they had all the smart people on the planet come play that I couldn't even, I'd sit down and they'd beat me. They'd hit the clock and I'd be like, I don't even know how that happened. I didn't move. But chess. Okay. So, set that up. Everybody, chess. If you haven't played, it's a fun game. So, I also want to take you, and if you go to the next slide back real quick, I want to take you a step, because obviously the last time Ben was up here, except for last Sunday, which was more of a Christmas view, the last time Ben was up here, who was he talking about? If you don't remember, I won't tell him. He's not here. It was Joseph. Okay, obviously, so we have Joseph, and to kind of give you that background, Joseph had some bad things happen. Okay, he was brought into Egypt, and then in the process of being in Egypt, he gained recognition by the Pharaoh, and he became very important in Egypt. And then his family came in, and then he brought them in, and he fed them, and there's a famine, right? Now, does anybody remember how long? I'm not going to test you on this. There was a famine, but was it supposed to last forever? No. Okay, it was only a few years, right? They were really only supposed to, or obviously, anybody ever go somewhere and you plan on only staying for 5 minutes, and 7 hours later, you're like, man, I'm just going to sleep on the couch. Sarah's told me a story this morning about staying, and she should have just went home because her back hurts now. So it's kind of that way, right? The Israelites were never planning to just stay in Egypt. But the thing is, Joseph had a good thing going, right? Pharaoh liked him. They had things. Who doesn't want things? And so they stayed. And so Joseph, his family stayed. They stayed in Egypt, and there's some debate on how long, so I'm not going to put an exact time on it. A few hundred years. Okay, so a few hundred years go by. Our country's not really that old, really when you think about it, and how much has happened in our country in a few hundred years, correct? So in a few hundred years, things changed. And not for the better. So what happened is, how many of you have a job? If you don't have a job, that's fine. But how many of you have been in a job and you have a new boss come in? Okay? When you have a new boss come in, how many of you have ever had a boss come in that just didn't know what you were able to do, or just didn't like you, or just didn't appreciate you, or didn't know? Okay, it kind of happened that way with the Egyptians. They're in Egypt. Joseph's cool, right? He and the Pharaoh slapping hands. Pharaoh goes away. A new Pharaoh comes in. And the problem is when a new Pharaoh comes in, Pharaoh basically is God, right? If you look at Egyptian way of doing things, Pharaoh is God. He is a God. And so in that, whatever Pharaoh says, and that's what happens. And so the dilemma with this is that Pharaoh didn't really appreciate Joseph. He had no contact with Joseph, no real interaction with Joseph. He didn't care, really, basically. And so because of that, he didn't like the Hebrews. And he got nervous about them, right? Anybody who's powerful and that God is with, sometimes people get a little nervous around. And so they got nervous. Pharaoh got nervous, and so because they said, we should watch these. And so basically what he did is he enslaved them. He put people over them, and he made them work and do things for him. And so at that point, that brings us to my other wonderful movie character, Moses, okay? And so from Joseph to Moses, a few hundred years, the Egyptians had been trodden down, they've been enslaved, they've been made to do work. And so that brings us to Exodus 3, which is where we're at. Okay? And we see, if you go, the reason I bring up chess is that chess, let me go back one, is that chess is a game of waiting, of observation, of thoughtful, provoked, non-provoked, focused movements. It's not rush in, checkers where you just start moving pieces and then everybody loses, or your kid wins in like one jump. I don't even know how that happens. It is planned. Some games, have you guys heard of some games lasting literally hundreds of years? Like they pass it down in family. It's crazy. I don't even know how they do that. But there are games that literally people spend their entire lifetimes playing in chess because it is a thought-provoking situation. And I want you to parallel that with God. Now, I'm not saying God plays games. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that he is waiting. He can wait. He can observe. He can make thoughtful movements because he created everything. He has the ability to take and see the entire game. You know, there's people, I don't know how they do this. There are people that can look at a board like this and they can see 20 or 30 moves ahead. Do you realize? Both sides. They can calculate the probability. I can't do that. But there are people that can calculate all the probabilities of their opponent doing this move, and I do this move, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen. Basically, they win the whole game before it even starts because they already know the probability. That's God. And that's the crazy thing about this is that when we talk about the plan that God has, he has strategy already. He built the strategy into this game. It's kind of like evil and the devil and the Pharaoh and playing the computer, right? Anybody ever go to play the computer and you're like, man, I can't win. It's the computer. It's like playing, God created this entire universe. And so he knows, he has strategy. And I think sometimes we have problems, and I know I have problems, waiting on that strategy. And we have problems because we're down here. Like I'm right here. And all I can see is either what's in front of me, what's beside me, and I see nothing else. But the fun thing is God sees this. And he can see that, and he knows that this piece will move here, and this piece will move here, and this piece will move here. And if this one loses, he can move this one. And he sees the entirety of it. And so that's where I want to really quick looking at Exodus 3, is that going to that, this is where the Israelites found themselves, right? I mean, ultimately, what is a few hundred years to God? Nothing. I mean, that was him. I mean, he didn't even have to hit his clock, like, on the game. Like, it's nothing. But the thing is, Moses, and to give you a little background, if you don't know, Moses wasn't really, he originally, the Pharaoh wanted to kill all of the Israelite kids after that. Didn't want them. The boys. The girls were fine, but not the boys, because he didn't want them to rise up. And so he tried to have midwives kill them. The midwives took pity on them. That didn't happen. And so then what he finally did is told all of his citizens any male offspring had to be killed. Well, obviously Moses was born. His mother loved him and found a way to keep him alive, put him in a basket, sent him down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter went and found him, took him out of the basket. If you've ever seen Prince of Egypt, it's, you can see it in color. Took him out, and then Moses became, again, loved by the Pharaoh's family, which is crazy, right? Isn't that amazing how God's people go into places and they still find a way to be blessed, even in the worst situations? Now, the problem with that is Moses was blessed, but then he really wasn't loved totally by either side, right? You ever be in that situation where you're in the middle and you just can't, there's no good side? Because he was in the Pharaoh's family, but he was still Hebrew. They still knew that. And so he went out, and one day he saw a slave driver basically beating a Hebrew. What did Moses do, right? Well, obviously he thought that was awful, so he stopped it, and in the process killed the Egyptian. In everybody's book, that's a bad thing. And so Pharaoh, obviously, when Moses realized this, even some Hebrews said things about, well, what are you going to do to me when he's trying to break up a fight? What are you going to try to do to me? Kill me too? And so Moses got freaked out and ran away. So that brings us here. Moses fled out into the desert, basically. He found his father-in-law, married, and became a shepherd. Now, in the process, he found himself out in the wilderness with his herd. Now, how many of you, if you saw a bush that was on fire that didn't burn, would freak out? The funny thing is, half of us would, run away. The other half would be like, ooh. Stay away from the light. Jenny knows what I'm talking about. She just want to go play with it. Let's poke the fire. So, if you see a burning bush that's not consumed, you'd be like, what in the world? But at this point in time, obviously, there were still things like magic. And at this point, I think back, in the few hundred years living in Egypt, how solid do you think their faith was? You know what I mean? Have you thought about that? Like, if you've read anything in the Old Testament, it's really weird how finicky the Israelite faith can be, and how, oh, yes, God, and then they're gone. And then, oh, yes, God, and then they're gone. So in a few hundred years living in Egypt, and for a few of that, being rich and wealthy and having things and then not and being slaves, that's probably going to try your faith. So I'm not sure. I'm sure Moses would have understanding. He would know that the God of the Israelites, and he would know that. But you wonder, how solid was that? Now, his father-in-law was fairly solid from what I understand in that. But ultimately, God says, come here. Now, Moses says, here I am. That's where Crystal read to. If you look from there, do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Obviously, in a holy place, it's a very strong tradition in the Hebrew faith that when you enter the temple, enter certain places, you take your shoes off. It's reverence. At this time, their feet were gross. I mean, more gross than ours. Because they walked in sandals all the time through dirt and dust and grime and animal things. So it was gross. So they took their feet off and they would probably normally wash their feet before they enter into a place like this. But in this case, took his shoes off. His feet off. That'd be weird. That'd be hard to balance. So, and at this point, this is where God, and I think how many of you would love to know God's plan? Like, wouldn't it be awesome? I'm sorry, if you didn't raise your hand, you must not be processing, because if I could just know, like, if I know, hey, I'm going to go talk to this person, he's going to say yes, I'm going to bring him to church, he's going to go to heaven. Yes! It'd be so much easier. When, you get that little twinge in the back of your head, go talk to that person. It'd be so much easier, right? You wouldn't have the butterflies. You wouldn't be sitting there going, not yet. This is where God basically starts to lay out for Moses his strategy. He just lays it out there and starts to tell him. This doesn't happen very often. And so what he sees here is, Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the land of Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, Hittites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are pressing them. So go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, to Israelites, out of Egypt. Now, do you really think this is just when God heard them after a few hundred years? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have selective hearing, like when my wife talks and I'm watching TV. I'm pretty sure he heard them. It's just this was the time. Okay? This was his move at this point. And he picked Moses for his game piece. He's like E5, I don't know how that works, E4 to whatever. I don't remember all that stuff. I never learned that. I just moved the things. But this was his choice. He shared with Moses, this is what we're going to do. How many of you have ever had God tell you, if you go talk to this person, they're going to get to heaven? No, that does. If you did, great, awesome. Please keep that up. But I haven't. I have not had God tell me that you will go talk to this person, it will turn out perfect, and you will get milk and honey. But he did. And he did it with a burning bush. It's not even like, that moment where you have the thought in your head and you're like, was that God or did I just eat something bad? It was God talking to him, telling him it's going to be good. I'm going to do this. This will happen. This is the strategy I'm going with. And so that's the crazy thing about this. So that brings me to the next slide. So the other thing with chess is the point obviously is to win, right? The point is to get to the point where you win. Now, winning may look long and drawn out in some cases. So check. Does that mean I win? No. Can I have multiple checks? You can have lots. Okay, in certain cases, there can be all sorts of checks. Check is just, and there's all sorts of words that came before that, again, we're Asian. I don't know how to say them. But check is the word used to establish cornering your opponent, beginning to implement your strategy. So we form strategy. That's the first thing we do. God obviously has strategy. The next thing we do is start implementing that strategy. And in this case, this is him implementing his strategy with Moses. And so we anticipate the moves of the opponent. We visualize the moves. See, the key to this is I can move one piece, but if I don't think a few moves ahead, I'm going to be losing. And so we anticipate the moves, and then we watch that strategy unfold, and we get them into a check position. Now, once they're in a check position, they're on their heels. And if the opponent is on their heels, are they going to be on the offense? No. Now, if they're good, yes. But if they're just playing, normally when you're in that situation, you're on the defense. What am I going to do? Who do I shove in there to get killed? Right? You're like, I don't need that rook as much as I thought I did. Let's just shove him out there. Throw your queen under the bus. She can move a lot. We'll just move her in front of me. So that brings us to the next part here, okay? Moses. But Moses said to God, and this is the funny thing about it. I questioned, thought, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? But God, literally Moses looked at God. Well, I don't know if he looked at God. He probably fried, but he literally was talking to God and said, I don't know, God. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your father has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Go assemble the elders. Now, I do want to, before I keep going, obviously there's a Yahweh, okay, is a name that basically the Hebrews don't even write. Okay, Yahweh is a name they don't write, they don't say it. You know, there's a term that they've given that is the name of God, the God that they don't really say. Okay? And so ultimately that's what he's establishing is that I am the one true God. I am the beginning, I am the end, I am. And that's what he's establishing here with Moses is making sure they understand the gravity and the importance of who he is and what he's trying to do in this situation and starting basically this long, drawn-out, very strategic game with the Hebrews that ultimately led up to Jesus, which then folded everyone else into that. So ultimately, go assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt, and I have promised you to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, the interesting thing about that is I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to guarantee this, but I'm pretty sure even most of those are their relatives. For those who don't, if you think through and process through, there was Ishmael and there's other family members that have gone out. So some of those I think they're even semi-related to, that they're kicking out. But basically, they're going to be given that. Land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are going to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So the interesting thing about this, not only did he share the strategy, he told him the check. He told him how he's going to start cornering the Pharaoh and how it will end up unfolding. The funny thing about this, did the Hebrews like him? Moses. Did the Hebrews really? No. He lived in Pharaoh's palace, for one thing, with the daughter. He killed an Egyptian. And there was really no interaction between Moses and the Hebrews for the most part. And so ultimately, when you really think about that, there's no real reason they should trust him or agree with him. But God told him they would. And so that's the crazy thing about this is, again, he's sharing his philosophy, his strategy, his belief in that this will happen with Moses and establishing this solid belief in him that he will be able to do this. And so with that establishment, we move to the end game. So with this, checkmate, this is where you get to that successful execution. This is where you see this game unfold. And you get to that point where basically at that point, there's no other option for your opponent. Anybody ever been playing chess? And you're sitting there and you're like, you got your strategy going? And you're like, I just got 2 more moves, and he's going to be check. And then all of a sudden your opponent looks at you and goes, checkmate. And you're like, what? That can't be right. Hold on. And you're like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done. It happens, right? I mean, the crazy thing about this is that there is and so basically, again, God just shares with Moses in this chapter the end game. He tells him, this is how it's going to go. I'm going to send you. The Israelites are going to accept you. You're going to go talk to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's not going to agree. So he's going to move his king. He's not going to do it. But the thing is, Pharaoh will then have to. And if you look at this next slide here, we see in Exodus 3:20. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people, so that when you leave, you will not leave empty-handed. But every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. So the funny thing is, not only does God tell him that they're going to get to leave, and that slavery is going to end, and that struggle is going to end, and that they're waiting, that waiting for that moment, and that relief, and that delivery, it's going to come. And he's going to tell them how it's coming. And it will be impossible for Pharaoh to say no. There is no way, after what God will wrought on the Egyptians, that Pharaoh will be able to say no. And basically, it will be checkmate for Pharaoh. And Moses is shared all of that in Exodus 3 when he's sitting there. When he sees the burning bush and he approaches and he knows God hears the Israelites' cries. The crazy thing is, he hears our cries too. Now, the crazy thing about that is the next piece. He hears your cry. He's heard the Egyptians cry. But the thing is, he delivered on his terms. Okay, he didn't come when the Pharaoh changed and didn't like the Israelites. He waited. And nobody knows why. It was part of his plan. That was his strategy. So he waited and delivered in his time. And I think sometimes we forget that we have cries, we have things that we need. But God delivers on his terms with his plan. We don't always know why. But he does expect obedience. And that's what he was telling Moses is, you will do this. And I don't care how crappy you talk. I don't care how weird you look. I don't care how short you are, tall you are, whether you have a stutter. Some people say Moses didn't speak well. That's a theory. He really doesn't expect any less out of us. He has a plan. If you're called, your piece is brought up. You need to do it. God used the willing. It took Moses a second to decide, but he was willing to go. And to be honest, he's continuing to do that. If you're willing to step up, if you're willing to be in the game, There are no pieces that are unnecessary. All of them serve a purpose. All of you, whether you know it or not, whether you think you're a pawn that is just here, and I just move, and I'm just here. Well, you know what happens to a pawn if he makes it clear to the other side? Anybody know? Yeah, well, you get a piece back. Usually people get their queen back, right? So the interesting thing is, every piece is important. The bishop is kind of a wily character because he goes diagonally and people don't always pay attention to that. I've seen a lot of games won with the bishop, right? Man of God. What I do want you to understand, though, king's a very important piece. But there's only one king in this life. That's God. And he will reign forever. Worship with us, please.